Hello, welcome to the webinar. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully this is the webinar you were expecting, Splunk Security Operations Suite. My name is Ben Marable. I'm a Somerford strategist, a security strategist here at Somerford. I've been working with Splunk for a long time and primarily in the security space. So I know hopefully can give you some insights into how enterprise security works and also how enterprise security works with all the other technologies that Splunk have within security. I'm joined here with Stu.
Hello, my name's Stu Lowe, also working at Somerford on the technical team, and predominantly I'm working with Splunk on the security side of things, similar to Ben, so a lot of my time spent working with enterprise security and Splunk SOAR.
Great, thanks Stu, good to have you with us. Okay, so what we're going to cover today, we're going to do essentially an overview of Splunk security. So just making sure that we understand all the different technologies that are part of the Splunk security stack, and really what is the Splunk security operations suite. So what really kind of takes the SOC from a level 1 SIEM to the level 2 kind of everything involved, automation and all sorts. So really it should be a good conversation today. We're going to touch a little bit on risk-based alerting and why this has come up now. It's quite a new concept, been around a couple of years now from Splunk, but it's going to be key to the alert that we're going to really kind of go into through this journey today. So hopefully we'll just want to make sure everyone's got an understanding of it. And then we're actually going to go into using Splunk SOS or Splunk Security Operations Suite. So this is where we're actually going to do a live demo of the actual suite for you. Hopefully everything goes as it should do. So what is Splunk security? Well, first off, it starts with Splunk Enterprise, Splunk Core, Splunk Cloud. You can do a lot of security use cases, security concepts with just Splunk. The logging and monitoring solution, the aggregation tool to get lots of different data from lots of different sources into one place, and being able to then search through that to look for malicious behavior, threats that might be occurring in the environment, lots of different great stuff. So first off, it's very fundamental to understand that Splunk Enterprise is kind of the bedrock of everything that we're going to be talking about. It doesn't sit as such in the Splunk Security Operations Suite, but it is fundamentally underneath that. So very important to understand that it is for security. Then we have Splunk Security Essentials, which is a completely free app that sits on top of Splunk Enterprise, and this is the content. So a long time ago, now it's been around for quite a while, but prior to that there wasn't really very easy to get content for Splunk, security based content that is. So teams at Splunk basically came up with the idea of being able to hand over the content that everybody might be developing around the world to look for, you know, known sort of threats. Maybe that's ransomware, maybe that's Spectre, Meltdown, whatever it is, and having this kind of concept of being able to consume that and actually run these sort of searches and detections in Splunk Enterprise. Then we have a Splunk Infosec app, which is also another free app on top of Splunk base you can download, which has some interesting insights into authentication, into vulnerability management, some sort of really key kind of security concepts. So these are the sort of 3 kind of key push points to kind of have as your bedrock of Splunk, of security using Splunk technology. So if you're using Splunk for a different use case, maybe that observability or IT operations, and you want to start using it for security, these are the kind of starting points that you would want to be looking at, these sort of 3 different key points, really. And then we have enterprise security, right? So enterprise security is the application that takes Splunk Core, Splunk Enterprise, Splunk Cloud to the next level to be a fully fledged SIEM and then sort of modern world of what a SIEM can really do. So security information event management. So being able to actually take alerts and triage alerts and respond to alerts and have a process there in place to be able to do everything that you need to do in a SOC that's measurable, reportable, and really kind of getting to that kind of first point of being able to have a team dedicated to security, dedicated to cyber. This is that tool set, that first tool set that's really key to get that cyber team kind of powering and running off the ground. We also have aligned to that ES content updates, which is very similar to Splunk Security Essentials, but really is just specifically for enterprise security. And this is a way of Splunk being able to deliver latest content to enterprise security customers. So if you see certain things in the news, what's really key is being able to get searches, getting understanding of how to actually look for that and all sorts. So if something comes up, just the new things. So I said Spectre earlier. So if Spectre came up and or something along those lines with something or whatever it might be, we get that delivered to us. It's going to come, the Splunk security research team or the search team will be able to generate content for us to be able to hunt for that thing, see what we got to see if we can find it in the organization, but also give us understanding of what we do with that if we do find it. And this is the methodology of how they give that to enterprise security customers. It's a free add-on to enterprise security. It's just enterprise security corrects quite a lot to be able to update all of that. So they have a little app that just kind of gets updated with all the latest content around security. Then we have Splunk's user behavior analytics. So this is a different technology essentially that integrates very nicely with the enterprise security, and it's really about detecting unknown threats. So enterprise security, detection search, the sort of stuff that you put in security essentials and you get all those sort of juicy sort of searches to look for things. They're looking for something. You know what you're looking for. And that might be behavior based. That might be something like an anomalous kind of activity. So someone's looking over a period of time and seeing that this user's connecting to more systems than they would normally do. This user's downloading more data than they would usually do. That's anomalous, right? And that can be detected. You know what you're looking for. Whereas behavior analytics and UBA kind of takes that to the next level. It's really about taking in what the peer group analysis does, taking in all of the different behavior that user is distinguishing, and then taking all those anomalies, running them through a load of different data models and machine learning essentially to create anomalies, and then looking at all those anomalies with the raw events again to then do another layer of data models to generate what's known as threats in UBA. And these are generally what are fed back into enterprise security, both the anomalies and the threats. Now, a UBA threat is something you want to deal with, and I'll talk about when we get to risk-based alerting. But a UBA anomaly, something to explore, something to look at. Not necessarily an anomalous behavior on its own isn't a malicious activity or a security threat. It's just something that's not behaving as you would expect it to behave. Whereas a threat is a collection of different anomalies that looks very similar to something that might be in there, or it's just really out of the blue that this user looks like they might be a flight risk or something like that, right? So you can get some really, really good insights with that technology. We then have Splunk SOAR, which we're going to focus a lot on in terms of what we can do. So this is security orchestration automation response, formerly known as Phantom. This has a whole kind of layer of really taking you to the next level with your SIEM, right? So you've got a point where you're detecting things, whether that's using UBA, whether that's using Splunk Core, you're being able to triage that in enterprise security, but you really want to kind of take all of those sort of standard operating procedures that you've developed and just automate them using machine speed. So we'll talk a bit more about this, of course, later, and we'll actually go and see how this SOAR kind of integrates with enterprise security in our demo. And there's a couple of other things that are kind of quite a bit more recent. Splunk On Call, formerly VictorOps, is really about getting the users to be able to understand when the alerts occur, right? So the ability to have on your phone an application. So you're working on call, you're working out of the hours. You have a ticketing system essentially that if you see a type of alert, you need to bring someone in the middle of the night. They'll get notified on their phone of this thing's happened. They can go in and actually run things from it. They can go in and communicate with everybody else, make notes, and everybody kind of has a place to try to track it all in an application, a modern day kind of interactive way of dealing with these things. So you get a lot better user experience for your security analysts. And then you've also got Splunk Intelligence Management, which is formerly TrueStar. A more recent acquisition of Splunk. This is really about curating your threat intelligence data. So you might be getting a lot of threat intelligence and threat data from lots of different sources, and it's really about making sure that that is weighted appropriately. Something that's coming from an open source threat intelligence piece, or a piece of data that's coming from something that someone's just put on the internet and said this is bad. Is that a trustworthy bit of information? If you get alerted on someone going to that particular place, maybe it's it's an AWS IP, and it was formerly a malicious activity, but AWS has repurposed that app through a legitimate site. How much weight do you put to that? How much do you want to kind of go and spend time investigating it? So Splunk Intelligence Management is really about kind of getting that level of understanding of what intelligence is useful, what intelligence is less useful. If you see it in lots of different feeds, it's probably a case that that's actually more useful to be to understand and kind of use from. So the Splunk Security Operations Suite, well, what is it out of this kind of stack of whole kind of Splunk security technology portfolio? Well, it's the three key ones, right? So it's enterprise security, it's UBA, and it's SOAR. And these are the three that we want to focus on essentially today. So we've got enterprise security. Hopefully you understand enterprise security, or you've gone to intro to enterprise security kind of pieces. This is the kind of link between the three really and what we're going to see, okay? Good. Right, so I did promise you a little bit on risk-based alerting, so let's just go through that and what it's about. So risk-based alerting is going to come from the fact, where are we, right? So we've got a lot of alerts coming in. Over 40% of organizations receive over 10,000 alerts a day. That's ridiculous to be able to deal with, right? What does that really mean? Lots of false positives, lots of people just getting lots of alerts being abandoned, right? So it's all well and good having this technology that's telling you about something's gone wrong. If no one can actually deal with it or respond to it, then you might as well have just not been told about it. So, you know, you do get a lot of abandoned alerts, you get a lot of suppressed alerts. So, you know, you just go, yeah, I've seen this before, I'm not interested again, but maybe next time it is actually malicious. Maybe you just overlook something. You get slow response times, you get burnout from staff, you get staff turnover. It's really a bad place. Yeah, it's challenging, everybody's seen it. So what do we do about it, right? And there's always a case of, right, we've got correlations, we've got our searches, they produce atomic alerts, we get an alert that the security analyst needs to pick up and figure out, and then a lot of the time it's just, okay, now I need to tune that analytics because excessive failed logins on its own is not really very good. Happens quite often in certain situations due to service accounts doing something or something else. You've got to tune these service accounts out. That's normally what this, you know, behavior that's normal sort of thing. Not sure why it would be, but it could be, right? So how do we deal with this, right? How do we get this kind of reduce the alert fatigue, but also at the same time, improve security coverage, right? So we don't want to just go like, we only need the most critical events. We only need to deal with things that are the highest priority. If we do it like that, we're ignoring a lot of great stuff. We want to be able to do all sorts of interesting, leverage a lot of interesting things that we see, okay? So this is where risk-based alerting comes in. So what do we do now? Well, we take analytics correlations and we observe behavior on that. So we might see a particular thing happening. Let's say someone logging onto a machine they've never logged onto before. Now, on its own, that's probably not very malicious, but let's observe that fact and say, okay, we know that's happened. Let's increase some risk on that, okay? Let's add a little bit of score to that behavior because that might be indicative of a security threat. Someone might have compromised that account that's now logged into a machine they've never logged onto before. We are having a tactic and technique assigned to it. We're annotating that information to say, okay, this is, you know, lateral movement. It's not business as usual, right? So we're looking at something that's out anomaly, you know, we can take that kind of piece. And now we alert after the fact, okay? So instead of alerting directly, we take note of it. And then if we see a certain amount of observations occur, we alert. So the alert is now slightly different than how it was before. It was no longer just something's happened, let's alert on it. It's now a collection of different things have happened and they have hit a certain risk score, and that meant that we now need to alert, or there's a certain number of tactics involved, so now we need to alert, or there's a certain things that are going on in your own annotations, right? You might have someone that's walked in the front door or in a building they've never walked into, or they've cross-channel, or all sorts of different things you might possibly imagine you can come up with and use and leverage. So how does this actually look in practice? Well, 6:55 a.m. we might have seen geographical improbable access detected. Now, that might happen quite a lot in most organizations, certainly has from when I run that sort of search in enterprise security in most organizations that I go into. There's people that are jumping around on VPNs, there's people that are just remotely connecting to machines in different areas. There could be a number of different reasons why this might happen. And it becomes quite noisy, okay? So that's one thing. Let's add a couple of points of risk because, you know, it could be something malicious, could be someone actually logging in with their own account and someone else compromising it from somewhere else. There could be a UBA anomaly, right? So UBA has picked something up and it's detected something at 6:58 a.m. Now, as I said earlier, threats, UBA threats, you probably want to deal with those. UBA anomalies, maybe less so. You can explore them, you can go threat hunting through them, they're really good, but on their own, you probably don't want to be kind of trying to put all hands on deck to try and deal with them. So you can maybe just take that into account. You can observe that. Maybe there's some emails bouncing around for a particular user or a particular system or something that's, you know, changing the brand and just tweaking, kind of going phishing or so forth, right? So people looking at URLs that aren't Splunk, they're now SLPunk or something similar like that, right? So you kind of an alteration of the actual brand name. So trying to kind of fish. Maybe you see an unusual volume of outbound traffic, right? So you're seeing a big spike of traffic. Maybe you're seeing some malicious PowerShell being running, or maybe it's not malicious at that point. Maybe it's just got some encoded commands. Maybe you're also seeing some buckets being created in AWS. Maybe you're seeing some data going up to an AWS S3 bucket. Now, all of those individually may be considered noisy. They may be considered abandoned. They may not be kind of taken individually as something that we want to observe. But collectively, when we hit that kind of 215 point, we've got to a certain point where the risk has kind of been elevated, right? So we've got 10 points of risk, 20 points of risk, 30 points of risk, whatever it is. It adds up. And over that sort of 24-hour period, we've hit our threshold of 100 points of risk. And our risk incident rule was then alerted on that, right? So because we've hit our threshold, we're now getting an alert. And inside that alert, we're seeing all of this data distributed to us. So we're getting very, very much higher fidelity alerts. We're looking at a wider space of security kind of concepts, right? We're looking at geographical and probable access, which we probably wouldn't have done before, or unless we were security hunting. You know, all this kind of great juicy stuff that we have previously not taken into account, now we can take into account. So now we've all gone into RBA, and we've all gone into what the security operations suite is and Splunk security. Let's have a look at it in practice. So let's start off with this kind of journey of what a user or a security analyst would normally do during the day. So if you're not familiar with ES, hopefully you get an opportunity to come into one of our intros to ES workshops or webinars to kind of get an idea of how that works. I'm going to take some sort of understanding of enterprise security at this point, because you know we're trying to talk about interactions between enterprise security and SOAR and UBA and all that sort of stuff. So we're going to start here in the incident review, right? And here we can see 77 notables come back for our particular thing. And I'm just going to scroll through and look at a particular one. So this one is critical. So let's have a look at this. So this is Theodore, right? Our friend. He's, as you've been on many sort of demos, you'll probably recognize Theodore come up quite a lot. You can see their risk score is at 920 points. That's clearly over 100 points. So, you know, you can understand why it's been triggered. There are 46 risk events here. So actually what we can do is click on this and show you those risk events over time. So when you click on that, you'll get all of the risk events presented to you basically. So everything that we've observed is now presented to you in a kind of a column chart here. That's not right. It's a timeline basically, but the amount of risk that's generated is on the left-hand side. So we've got a lot of geographical and probable accesses going on. And if I scroll up to the higher kind of level things, you can also see UEBA threats detected. You can see unusual volume of outbound activity, malicious PowerShell. All of this has happened over this particular time frame, which is, you know, today. And so forth. And if you scroll in, you can kind of get a bit more of a timeline over that if you need to, and all of that great stuff. And if you scroll down, you can see all the information that's presented back by risk score, ordered by risk score essentially. So you've got the risk rule and everything that you need to see. You've got threat objects, and threat objects are key, right? So risk is great at kind of just assigning to an asset or an identity or some sort of object, but also you want to tie all that together. Well, why have we assigned this risk? Well, there's a threat here, there's a particular URL, there's a particular command being run, it's a particular host, particular source they might have gone to. Yes, this system is what we're alerting on the risk threshold for, but it's gone to a particular threat object. So you can use those threat objects to really tie things together. So we're looking at 7.1 of ES here. Which also has this threat topology piece now. So we can see a bunch of different threat objects linked to a bunch of different risk objects. So we can actually see how Theodore is actually connected to these particular IP addresses. You can see via particular HDORs and so forth, right? So really interesting kind of insights between lots of different things that are going on. So I just wanted to kind of expand on it. So we've expanded on it. We can see the MITRE attacks that are involved, so the tactics that are triggered and the techniques technically. So initial access tactic, execution tactics involved, lateral movement tactics involved. Naturally, it's into a review, so we can see all the sort of details on the left-hand side here. So we can see that this a bunch of different Splunk events have occurred, the risk rules, so you can see the sources that risk rules have occurred on. We can see the user, we can see the user's risk score, we can do all the normal sort of pivoting if we want to around from these particular perspectives. We've got all the information from the identity list and asset list. And also you'll see that where the event details are actually now key, because we're going to be linking between two different systems and so forth. So what we can do is just expand across this, and we got next steps about what we would want to be doing in that kind of space. And also what you will see is that it's been triggered, kicked off in Splunk. Maybe I should just, in SOAR, automatic playbooks have been kicked off. So let me just, it's probably just because I need to just refresh. Give me a moment. Those SOAR playbooks should have kicked off automatically. So as soon as this risk event has actually occurred, it's sent something to Splunk SOAR to deal with this particular thing, and we'll see that, and I'll let Stu go through that in detail. Here we go. Right, so now we've got all the notes that are coming back from SOAR. So on the history side, it just happened to be I hadn't refreshed it. So we've got all this information about what's actually been going on. We can browse through the history of this kind of thing, all these notes that are going on, and we've got lots of different pages of it, and we've actually got a link as well in here to the Phantom event. So we can go ahead and just open that in a new tab, and that will show us Splunk SOAR, which is where I'm going to hand over to Stu to go through from here.
Thank you, Ben. So what we can now see is the investigation screen of Splunk SOAR for the 7-day attack tactic threshold event that has been forwarded from Splunk Enterprise Security. This is the evidence tab that we can see right now, where artifacts important to the event have been flagged as relevant. What we can also see on this page are tabs for the timeline. Now this shows a complete audit of activity performed so far for this event. We also have the notes tab. This is where a collection of all notes for an investigation are correlated together. And finally, workbooks, which is a list of standard tasks an analyst might perform to prosecute an incident. Is where we can find the SOC runbooks in Splunk SOAR, essentially. So let's open up this in progress workbook. This is the one that the URL Ben clicked has sent us to, and we're going to review automated tasks already begun. So workbooks are essentially workflows that provide prescriptive and repeatable guidance set to follow any framework your organization uses. So within SOAR, there are out of the book frameworks such as NIST, which can be configured, or you can write your own. Tasks can be marked complete, like here by clicking on the tick, but also this panel allows us to initiate automation to complete tasks, allowing us to do so at machine speed simply by clicking on the playbook title. It would be useful to take a quick look at what playbooks are in SOAR, see what they actually are. So there is a different webinar and a short video I've recorded which goes into far more detail, and I welcome you to take a look at them. But briefly speaking, what you can see on the screen now is a SOAR playbook. At the top, we can see a start box. This is where the logical flow of actions begins once the required event reaches Splunk SOAR. So if the event has the correct label, this playbook will begin here, and each box below will perform some action all the way down to the finish box. An action or a decision, that is. On the left are some examples of the types of things a playbook can do. So we have action blocks here. These will make a device or platform perform some kind of desired action by, for example, interacting with its API. And here we can see our functions to allow for flow logic. So we've got filters and decision blocks here. We can drag and drop these across. And put together, we can see on the left, or on the right rather, the kind of automation that can be achieved. So from start to finish here, we've got a logical flow from block to block to block. But going back to our workbook now, on the left-hand side of the screen, we can see that our workbook is divided into stages and tasks. Now the first stage is called, here anyway, it's called initial triage, within which there are 3 tasks. We have pre-process, investigate, and render verdict. Now if we click on the pre-process task and then expands the description part, which we can see here, we can find prescriptive guidance for the analyst on how to perform this task. We can also attach notes to this task as well, just by clicking on here, and also add files, which we can see me doing here. We can actually see that Splunk SOAR has already started this task, as 2 of the runbooks we can see they've already been run automatically, as indicated by these tick marks. So what has happened here is that this event, when forwarded from enterprise security, contained a label, which we briefly discussed earlier, which these playbooks have been configured to act upon when detected. We can see that the start investigation playbook has not yet been run, however, and it's the 3rd bullet point in the description for this task, which tells us it performs some initial case ownership tasks and moves the status to open. So we're going to run this now by clicking on it. So we can now move on to the next task, investigate. So from the description, we can see that we need to run the risk notable enrich and risk notable merge event playbooks, and then click complete task. We run risk notable enrich, and then if we look at the notes and expand here, we have some information about the event already available to us. We can see reports on the hash of the executable that launched the encoded PowerShell process has a high threat score, and information on IP addresses related to improbable login events attempts based on their reported geolocation. Below this, we can see a decoded string containing the PowerShell script and reports on an IP address discovered actually within this string once it was decoded. So already we can see here there's a rich source of information to assist an analyst in their investigation, which has been programmatically generated from various sources. For example, we can see that the user has attempted to log in from both US and UK based IP addresses, which is certainly improbable considering its time frame. Also, it does look like an endpoint has been compromised, as this script has been noted as running. So next, we must run the risk notable merge events playbook. So after we run this playbook, we can see a prompt appear in the top right of the screen, meaning that there is a task for us to complete. So we're going to click that prompt, and we can now see a list of possible related events that we are being asked if we want to merge into this case. So we can see underneath exactly what this merge process entails. So what it says here, the current event will become a parent case, and all of its artifacts, notes, and events will be copied to this parent case, and those events will be marked as closed. So for this example, we're going to select merge all. And if we return to the evidence tab, we can now see these associated events listed, and that this investigation is now marked as a case, which we can see here, and the event is also marked as a parent. From the notes tab, we can also now see notes associated with these merged events, as we would expect. And also we're now going to click complete task. And finally, we've got our render verdict task here, where we'll pick up a response plan. We should first record what our decision is and why. For instance, in this scenario, we have improbable user logins and an endpoint that has likely been compromised. So we're going to enter this in the notes section as shown here. We'll then click Start Task and then proceed to run the Risk Notable Verdicts Playbook. So as before, we can see a prompt appear in the top right of the screen. We're going to click this, and the resulting prompt tells us that we have available to us a list of response playbooks. So we can see a number of playbooks available to us here, and for this demonstration, we will select Risk Notable Mitigate. So what this playbook will walk us through is it's in 2 important tasks for any investigation. So blocking threats to the environment and then isolating anything impacted. So an additional prompt now appears in the top right called select indicators. So as before, we're going to click on this, and then we can see a list of indicators that we may wish to block. It's worth noting here that actually these are the indicators we reviewed earlier on in this demonstration. So this was some of the intelligence gathered automatically. And for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll block this file hash. Once we've done this, we can go to the evidence page and expands the action results section like so here. And we can see that this hash has indeed now been blocked. So now, as before, we return to our workbook, and our next task is going to be to isolate affected users and devices from our incident to ensure that we have time to properly determine the root cause. So expanding the description here, we can see that the next playbook will connect to Splunk Enterprise Security, and it's going to determine if we have any known assets or identities affected by this attack. We can see that the required playbook has already been run for us here. We see the tick, and we can see that the protect prompt at the top right, which we're going to click, and then we are going to review the results. And what we can see is that we have a low priority workstation affected, as well as our previously mentioned friend Theodore, who has a privileged account. So we can safely go ahead and take action to isolate these entities, and we're safe in the knowledge that we're not risking further impact in our environment, inadvertently or otherwise. And now we've done that as well, let's just check on that. So we return to the evidence screen. We can see that Splunk SOAR has taken care of the user by disabling that account and revoking tokens. And it's also quarantined the affected device from the network. So we've now performed all the required actions to initially mitigate this incident. As discussed earlier, all the while SOAR has been performing these actions, it's actually been reporting back to Enterprise Security to update the event. And now that this investigation is closed for now, looking back at Enterprise Security, we would see that the event has also been closed there. So when Splunk SOAR and Enterprise Security are connected in this way, there are numerous actions possible via API that the two systems can use to interact for each other. So just by another example there, Splunk SOAR and a Playbook could be used to run a search in Enterprise Security, which has actually been happening quite a lot in the background of some of these playbooks we've been using. And that actually brings us to the end of this webinar. So we thank you for watching. And if you have any further questions, then please do contact us at info@somerfordassociates.com. Thanks again.